Okay, so thank you everybody for being here. And so tonight we'll be talking a little bit about Shin Buddhism, or the Jodo Shinshu tradition of Buddhism. And so just some basic information about our school. So our teaching is called Jodo Shinshu, or the true essence of the Pure Land Buddhist teaching. And our founder was Shinran Shonin, who lived in the 12th century Japan. And he was a contemporary of Dogen Zenji. They overlapped in some time period in the 12th century. And so the name of our school in particular is the Jodo Shinshu Hongwanji Ha. And so our head temple is Ryukokuzan Hongwanji, or the Nishi Hongwanji, which is based in Kyoto. And so our object of reverence in our tradition is Amida Buddha, or the Buddha of infinite light and life. Also, our scriptures that we base our teachings on, our sutras, are the three Pure Land Sutras delivered by Shakyamuni Buddha. And so they are the larger sutra, the Sutra of Immeasurable Life, this Contemplation Sutra, and the Sutra on Amida Buddha, or the smaller sutra, or the Amida Kyo. So those are just kind of just a general framework of our tradition. And so, our tradition has a long history. In 2023, we will be celebrating our 800th anniversary of our establishment and the 850th anniversary of the birth of Shinran Shonin, our founder. And so, but in America, Jodo Shinshu came to America in the early 1800s with the early Japanese American immigrants. And so, so our temples, my temple in particular here in the island, the Kono Hongwanji, we will be celebrating our 125th anniversary next year. And so we were established and founded in 1897. And the Hompo Hongwanji Mission of Hawaii, which is the our state organization here, celebrated its 130th anniversary a few years ago. So our counterpart on the continent, the continental United States, is the Buddhist Churches of America, or the BCA. And so, which has temples across the United States, all through the West, through the Midwest, in the Rockies, and on the East Coast. So, there is the believe the Tri-State Denver Temple that is affiliated with our school, and so, so in a nutshell, our teaching in Jodo Shinshu is attaining the entrusting heart, awakening to the compassion of Amida Tathagata, Amida Buddha, through the working of the primal vow. We shall walk the path of reciting Amida's name, the Nembutsu. At the end of life, we'll be born in the Pure Land and attain Buddhahood, returning at once to this delusional world to guide people to awakening. Our way of life is guided by the teaching of Shinran Shonin. We shall listen to the compassionate calling of Amida Buddha and recite the Nembutsu, while always reflecting on ourselves. Amidst our feelings of regret and joy, we shall live expressing our gratitude without depending on petitionary prayer or superstition. And our purpose, the Hongwanji school. So Hongwanji in Japanese means temple of the original vow, or temple of the primal vow, right? So Hongwan is primal vow, and Ji, temple, so temple of the primal vow. So the Hongwanji school is a community of people joined together revering the teaching of Shinran Shonin and saying the Nembutsu. We seek to share with others the wisdom and compassion of Amida Buddha. By doing so, we shall work toward the realization of a society in which everyone is able to live a life of spiritual fulfillment. So that is our purpose as a Sangha, as a spiritual community. And so Amida Buddha. Amida is the Japanese term for Amitabha and Amitayus. So Amitabha as boundless light or infinite wisdom and understanding, and Amitayus, boundless life or infinite compassion or caring. Amida Buddha, in our tradition, right, is not a historical Buddha, right? Amida Buddha is a symbol, is an expression of ultimate reality, of the oneness that is formless, right? So this timeless reality. So we understand the working of wisdom and compassion in the form of Amida Buddha. And so Shinran explains that the oneness out of deep compassion took form as Bodhisattva Dharmakara, who eventually became Amida Buddha to establish the Pure Land and to lead beings to Buddhahood. And so in our sacred scriptures and the Pure Land Sutras tells the history of Dhammakara Bodhisattva, who made 48 vows, and established the Pure Land of Enlightenment for the welfare and the happiness of all beings, and became Amida Buddha, the Buddha of infinite light and life. And so in our tradition, our practice is the Nembutsu, is the name of the Buddha, of reciting the name of the Buddha. So Nen or Nem Butsu, to think on, or to reflect on, or to remember the Buddha, right? So in traditional Pure Land Buddhism, it was the actual recitation or the visualization actually of the Buddha and the Buddha's land as the original practice. And then in Jodo Shinshu tradition, we use the recitative Nembutsu, or the saying of Namo Amida Butsu, as the way we understand and encounter timeless reality. So Namo Amida Butsu means I entrust in the Buddha of all-inclusive wisdom and all-embracing compassion. And so here you can see, you saw in the earlier slide, a painted scroll of Amida Buddha, a pictorial representation of the Buddha. In this scroll is another object of reverence in our tradition, which is the name itself. So this is Namo Amida Butsu. And so in our tradition, the name itself is an object of reverence. So, and so the ultimate religious experience in Jodo Shinshu, in Shin Buddhism, is this idea of Shinjin, or true entrusting, or the entrusting heart. So it's composed of two kanji characters, which is Shin, which is to entrust, or trust, or a confidence, and Jin, which is heart and mind, right? So combined, it is the entrusting heart and mind that an individual receives from the Buddha, right? So Shinjin is the entrusting that is awakened within each person through the working of the primal vow. Shinjin refers to Amida's compassion when it becomes apparent to the person thus liberated and awakened. And Shinjin, right, is the true cause. Therefore, we recite the name of Amida Buddha in gratitude for receiving Shinjin, for receiving the heart and mind of the Buddha in our own lives. And so in our tradition, the Nembutsu is not a practice that we do to attain enlightenment, right? The Nembutsu is an expression of gratitude for what we have received and what we are receiving from timeless wisdom and compassion. So you know, the Nembutsu itself, you can think of, there has been some comparisons, right, to Nembutsu and the practice of Zazen, you know, that they're both are kind of this idea of practice realization, right? That it's a manifestation, or it's an expression of what is there, right? Of what is present in an individual. right, who is undertaking this path. So you can think of Nembutsu in the Jodo Shinshu tradition, kind of like that. So, and so one of the uh, essential components of Shinjin is this idea of deep mind. So this comes from Shinran's master work, the Kyogyo Shinchu, or the teaching, practice, and realization. And so basically this deep mind is a twofold mind, which we come to know ourselves, right, as a being that's limited, that's burdened by karmic hindrances, right, a foolish being, right? But simultaneously, we are embraced by dynamic wisdom and compassion because we are foolish beings, because we are ordinary. And so this deep mind of Shinjin happens simultaneously, right? As we come to know ourselves, as we come to an awakening of self, we come to realize our true nature, which is ultimately embraced by dynamic wisdom and compassion. And so for Shinran, right, the founder of Jodo Shinshu, he realized that the spiritual journey to perfect awakening in the Pure Land was through a journey through imperfection. The Shin Buddhist scholar, the Reverend Dr. Taitetsu Unno, once described the Pure Land path as taking place by descending into the valley, the shadow of the mountain. He believed that it is in this valley in the shadows where Shin spirituality flourishes, because it is where we encounter the dynamic activity, the working of Amida Buddha's wisdom and compassion. This metaphor illustrates Shinran's fundamental spiritual insight of imperfection and radical acceptance, which leads to a life of transformation, healing, and compassionate action. Shinran's spiritual path was one of critical self-reflection about his own limitations as a human being. By awakening to the activity of perfect wisdom and compassion in his life. And so for Shinran, right, he found strength and resilience in being able to say, I'm not okay. Right? Shinran in our tradition, studied for 20 years on Mount Hiei and still felt like a failure. Nowhere closer to enlightenment than when he first started. Right? And so when he encountered the Pure Land teachings of Honen Shonin, his teacher, that became his salvation or his path of awakening to himself, because he realized he was not capable of doing everything perfectly, doing everything in the traditional way. And so what he realized was the working of Namo Amida Butsu, the working of Amida Buddha in his life. And so Namo Amida Butsu, right, is in essence, Namo means to say, I give up, or I entrust, right? But what do I entrust in, or what do I give up to? Amida Butsu, or a power beyond the self, a power that is beyond my ego, our individual ego, right? And so in Namo Amida Butsu is my own life, and the life that sustains me becomes one. The oneness of Buddha and human beings, right? So that is the essence and the power of Namo Amida Butsu within our tradition. And so Professor Mark Ono describes Shinran's spiritual awakening as, at its deepest level, Shinran saw himself as the recipient of the gift of the Dharma rather than its dispenser. His true Buddhist identity came effectively into relief only in the solitary light of his own self-awareness. The truth of the self can only be seen when one is alone with the universe. It was in the realization of Dharma and enlightenment as a gift from Amida Buddha that Shinran saw his full humanity, his full humanness, and which served as the foundation for his life. In a similar fashion, we can own our brokenness and transform our imperfections into a source of compassion. The Shin Buddhist path views the shadow of our imperfections as the reason for our life of awakening. Shinran describes this spiritual process in one of his writings, one of his poems, his wasan, from the hymns of the Pure Land Masters. He says this: obstructions of karmic evil turn into virtues. It is like the relation of ice and water. The more the ice, the more the water. The more the obstructions, the more the virtues, right? So here we see the spiritual alchemy that and the spiritual transformation that is at the heart of the Shin Buddhist experience. And this is what Shinran understood and how he appreciated the working of Amida Buddha within his life. Now, this life of honest self-reflection, right, and transformation is essential to understanding Shinran's view of human nature and of Shin Buddhist spirituality. How does this realization of imperfection function in our life? How does Shin Buddhist spirituality lead to a life of transformation and change? So according to Reverend Dr. Taitetsu Ono, this light of Amida Buddha not only illuminates our darkness, it transforms it so that we try our best to be compassionate with a sense of humility and gratitude, mindful of our karmic limitations. Humility arises for having been shown our karma-bound self, yet grateful for the boundless compassion that inspires us to act with a new and vigorous appreciation for life. Uno's words aptly describes Shin Buddhist spirituality and how it can serve as the foundation for our spiritual awakening and our path. You know, this dynamic relationship between an individual and Amida Buddha is the heart of the Shin Buddhist path, which according to Reverend Takamaro Shigaraki means that the Buddha's great compassion does not exist apart from our realization of our own defiled passions and karmic sins. Great compassion exists necessarily when it takes in our karmic sins. This acknowledgement and acceptance of our imperfections is the heart of Shin Buddhism, which opens up the possibility for transformation and spiritual healing. Shinran's understanding of human nature and spirituality can be seen in this paradoxical relationship of truly living with our imperfections and limitations every moment of our lives. Right? The karmic burdens realized by Shinran are the fundamental imperfections we all share as human beings. He came to understand that these imperfections are an integral part of who we are and are inseparable from the activity of the sacred, of enlightenment in our life. It is only because of our imperfections and rough edges that the sacred exists and is able to embrace us fully. If our lives are perfect, right? Smooth, there would be nothing for the sacred to grasp onto and to hold on to. So in our tradition, we talk about the embrace or living in the embrace of the Buddha. And so it is only when Shinran embraced uncertainty, realized his lack of control, and accepted his helplessness that his imperfections were transformed into the cause of spiritual awakening. It was only because Shinran himself had rough edges, was flawed, was broken, that Amida, that wisdom and compassion, had some place to grab onto. Right? It was only because of the gaping holes in his life that the Dharma, that the teachings, that the truth had some place to fill. This radical acceptance of our imperfect selves is the essence of the Pure Land path. And so you might be familiar with Joan Sutherland Roshi. And so I came across this article, and she said this in the article. You know, perhaps enlightenment is that which comes towards us, a previously unimaginable grace, while awakening is that which arises within us, to prepare for and meet the grace, and to hold it once it's come. For me, this perfectly sums up how I understand the working of Amida Buddha, of wisdom and compassion in my life, right, as a Shin Buddhist. And so we have, right, that you can see this is an image of Amida Buddha. And Amida Buddha in the Hongwanji or in the Jodo Shinshu tradition is always standing, right? So not a seated Buddha, right? And the reason why Amida Buddha's, the images are standing, is to show that wisdom and compassion is dynamic and always coming to us, always embracing us, right? You can notice the mudras, right? Have no fear and, come as you are, right? And so you can, in most images of the Buddha, like this statue, the image itself is slightly leaning forward with one foot stepping forward, slightly forward, right? Again, also to symbolize the dynamic activity of wisdom and compassion. In our tradition, we talk about wisdom unfolding as compassion in our lives. That to us is Amida Buddha. That to us is the working of great wisdom and compassion, right? And so for us, it is living in the embrace of universal compassion, right? That is the Shin Buddhist path. My life as a Nembutsu follower is not rooted in perfection, but rather in the transformative power of fully accepting my limitations, embraced by Amida's compassion. The central life-giving question of Shin Buddhism focuses on becoming aware of the gifts we receive because we're human, because we are imperfect, because we are perfectly imperfect. This is to hear, to reflect, and to respond to the call of compassion, which is always trying to expand our limited awareness. This is living in gratitude for the Buddha's vow. According to one of my seminary instructors, the Reverend Dr. Seigen Yamaoka, in Buddhism, gratitude is much deeper. The meaning is one of receiving sustenance, challenges, and meaning for everything in the universe. It is the realization that through the interrelationship of all things, we are able to live and grow. The spiritual awareness is what transforms and heals. We become more whole by embracing our suffering as a natural and essential part of being human. In this way, my limitations are transformed into strengths, which sustain my life and help me to hear the calling voice of Amida Buddha. This is the dynamic working of Amida's vow to grasp, never to abandon. This is the activity of wisdom unfolding as compassion, which transforms my brokenness into wholeness. In another of Shinran's writings, from the notes on the essentials of faith alone, Shinran describes the spiritual alchemy, which is catalyzed by Amida's compassion. When we entrust ourselves to the Tathagata's primal vow, we who are like bits of tile and pebbles are turned into gold. When we begin to see ourselves in this way, our lives are nurtured and we become more fully aware of our true humanness. Embracing my full humanness then empowers me to live with humility, gratitude, and compassion for self and others. I'm affirmed as a perfectly imperfect human being because universal compassion embraces us just as we are. It is ultimately okay not to be okay. This is the Shin Buddhist path of gratitude and joy. And so I want to share with you, you can check these out if you are interested in further study. These are some excellent books on Shin Buddhism and on the Pure Land path. Yeah, and so thank you very much for listening and for being here. I'd love to have a conversation with you. And so this picture is of my temple at sunset. So